Hi there, everybody. I'm Jeff Mayers from WisPolitics.com here with today's virtual event, a question and answer session with the Democratic candidates for U.S. Senate next year in Wisconsin. As you know, it's a big race. Senator Ron Johnson looks like he's running for re-election, and he appeared on a WisPolitics.com Milwaukee Press Club virtual event earlier this month, and so it made sense to, in the interest of equal time, to have the candidates for U.S. Senate on board too for a question and answer session. Just as a reminder to everybody, this is not a debate. It's a question and answer session. There's not timed responses. I've asked the candidates to please keep their answers short, and at some point I may have to try to interrupt them or cut them off, but I don't think we'll have to ever get to the point of muting them. I certainly don't want to do that. So anyway, try to have a good discussion here going forward. Now, this event is part of the Madison Club series that in normal times we would do at the Madison Club. We're going to get back to some in-person events in the fall, but today, for example, we may not have even been able to make this happen without doing it virtually. So there are some advantages. I want to thank our sponsors for these events, these Madison Club events, the Wisconsin Hospital Association, Hush Blackwell Strategies, American Family Insurance, ARP Wisconsin, Xcel Energy, and Walmart. So the format today, again, it's not a debate. I ask some questions. Then I relay some questions that were submitted by those in the audience in advance. And sometimes I won't get to all of them, do my best, and I'll probably combine some of them or rephrase them. So let's just get started, before we get to the news of the day, let's just get started with a little introductory phase for people who may not know all these candidates. And, let me just ask each candidate, and we're going to go in alphabetical order here. Why in the world would you upset your lives to take on this, which is going to probably be one of the top 2 Senate races in the country? And if you win, your life will not be normal. So because you'll be the focus of intense national scrutiny. So anyway, given that, Dr. Jillian Bettino from Wausau, why in the heck do you want to do this?
Okay, so people mostly call me Jill. So I want to do this because I want to bring trust, science, and more women to the U.S. Senate. Our public is 4 times more likely to trust their doctors than public officials, and I want to bring that trust with me when I go to the U.S. Senate. I also think it's become really clear over the last several years that we need more scientists and more STEM folks in our legislation, public health leaders to help us deal with and plan for things like the pandemic, and scientists to understand and design climate change solutions. I also believe that as a woman and as a physician and a mother of 6, that I have the unique opportunity to be the first woman physician in the US Senate and to advocate for reproductive health, gender equality, and paid family leave. And these are things that women can best advocate for.
Okay, thank you. And I'll call you Jill. All right, now let's go to Sarah Godlewski. She's the state treasurer. Sarah, why the heck do you want to do this?
Well, thanks, Jeff, for having me today. It's great to be here. I am a proud 5th generation Wisconsinite. I was born and raised in Eau Claire, worked at Pizza Hut and Baker Square to pay for college. And as the product of public schools, and my parents were 2 public school teachers, something that they taught me at a very early age is that when you see something wrong, you've got to stand up and do something about it. And that's exactly why I'm in this race. Ron Johnson cares more about conspiracy theories than working families. And our state deserves a senator that's actually going to fight for kitchen table issues. You know, case in point is the pandemic. Ron Johnson single-handedly held up $1,400 checks, relief for small businesses, and expanding vaccination programs. Meanwhile, as state treasurer, without any additional resources from the federal government or from the state government, I was helping Wisconsinites during the pandemic by simply being scrappy. And, you know, as somebody who spent part of her career in national security and working with the Pentagon, I have news for Senator Ron Johnson. January 6th was not a peaceful protest. It was a violent insurrection, and it showed us that the stakes couldn't be any higher in this race. And I am a candidate on this stage that has won statewide, not just once, but twice, winning in small towns, in large cities, and yes, even in Trump counties. And that's what I'm going to do in this race. I'm going to get the job done for the people of Wisconsin.
All right, now in alphabetical order, we have State Senator Chris Larson, who's also in a caucus right now too. So thanks for joining us, Senator Larson. Why in the world do you want to give up your office to do this?
For sure. Thanks for busting me out to my caucus right now. I think we're still in there. Thanks to virtual. But yeah, thank you, Jeff. I do think it's important. This seat particularly is it's crucial to make sure that we are doing all we can to unrig the system. Right now, we've got 66 millionaires in the U.S. Senate. And we could use a proven progressive to actually get in that seat to actually take on the big fights that are at stake right now. Ron Johnson, of course, is the poster child for all that's wrong in Washington with self-serving, self-interested politicians, where he wrote a provision into the Trump tax cuts that allowed him to nearly double his wealth and vaulted him to being the 6th richest U.S. senator in the country. Great for him. Not so great for the rest of us. So I think we have enough millionaires in the U.S. Senate. And I think it's worth having somebody serving our state who has paid their own way through college, somebody that knows what it's like to be uninsurable because you have a pre-existing condition and have to beg to try and get coverage with a healthcare provider over the phone, only to be denied. And somebody with a proven track record of standing up to special interests and against the billionaire class, to make sure our Wisconsin neighbors have an unflinching voice at the table. That's something I've done in the state Senate, fighting for affordable healthcare, fighting for public education, preserving our natural environment. And I think that's exactly what we need at the national level, and to further unrig the system so it works for everybody.
Okay, thank you, Senator. And now let's go to Alex Lasry, who's on leave from as an executive with the Milwaukee Bucks. Alex, why in the world do you want to do this?
Thanks, Jeff. Great to be here, and thanks for having all of us. This is a great forum, and really appreciate it. Look, I got into this race because I think what we need is a fresh perspective and someone who can bring some creative solutions and ideas and some real results to the U.S. Senate. I think what we've seen over the last 10 years is that we've really only had one U.S. senator in D.C. fighting on our behalf and fighting for our interests. And that's been a really big problem for us. And so, I'm running to make sure that we can give Tammy Baldwin a true partner in Washington to bring some real results and real change for the people of Wisconsin. And, in that, what I think, what we're going to need is something a little bit different. I've worked in the highest level of politics, but I'm not a politician. And so I think what we need is someone who can, who's got a track record of getting things done. We've been able to do things like actually pay a $15 minimum wage in Fiserv Forum and create thousands of good union jobs and, be at the forefront of racial and social justice and making sure that we were doing things to make sure people were registered to vote in 2020. And so I think, that track record and being able to say that, not only have we been able to stand up in a lot of these fights, but actually be able to bring people together to get things done, I think is something that's important and what we need in Washington. And I think it's what the people of Wisconsin deserve.
Okay, now on to Allegheny County Executive Tom Nelson, who's also a former state lawmaker. Welcome.
Thanks.
Why in the world do you want to do this, Tom?
Having me. Appreciate it very much. Appreciate this forum. Simply put, I want to make sure that this economy works for everyone and not just the millionaires and the billionaires like Ron Johnson. I grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood of Little Chute, Wisconsin, where all the dads worked at the paper mill, except my dad, who wore the white collar, who was a pastor. So I learned two very important issues growing up, two very important lessons. Number one, the importance of serving your neighbor, and the second, the importance of working families, their interests, the issues that make that matter most to them. And it's something I've never forgotten. When I was a legislator, every piece of legislation that came across my desk, simple question was, is this or is this not good from the working families on Carolyn Drive? Same thing for the budget items in the 10 budgets I passed as county executive. I have a solid record of winning in the red part of the state, and I've won 6 times in Fox Valley. Saved a paper mill with the local union that was set to shut down. We saved 300 good paying jobs. And last but not least, I'm running because Ron Johnson is a grade A conspiracy nut and an embarrassment to the state, and he must be defeated. This race is not for the faint of heart. It's not for on-the-job training. It's high stakes. We have to nominate the best, most experienced candidate.
All right. And last in alphabetical order is Stephen Olicara, who founded the Millennial Action Project. I have to, for full disclosure purposes, we did host a video podcast where Stephen was the host. As soon as he was reported that Stephen was looking into it, that podcast was suspended. So I just wanted to put that out there. Anyway, Stephen, I don't know whether you're yet a formal candidate, but you certainly have formed an exploratory committee. So why in the world are you toying around with this idea?
Well, thank you, Jeff. It's great to see you, and to all of the Senate candidates. It's an honor to be with you right now. I'm Stephen Olicara. I grew up in Brookfield, Wisconsin. My parents are immigrants from India, and I can just tell you that the idea of running for office could not have been a more foreign concept when I was growing up. But I got involved in politics because I think we need a fundamental shift in the culture to solve the scale of the problems that we face right now. And that's why a few weeks ago, we announced our exploratory committee for the U.S. Senate with a pretty simple mission of dignity and opportunity for all, creating an organizing model of politics that's more inclusive, more compassionate, and more honest. And a big part of my methodology is listening first with a lot of humility. So I've spent most of my time going across the state, listening to voters. And one of the most common things I hear are that people feel politically homeless right now. They feel disillusioned with the system. And so I want to elevate and spark a new kind of politics that's capable of solving these generational challenges that we face right now. And that's my experience after founding the Millennial Action Project. My job was to build diverse coalitions of legislators to get legislation over the finish line, whether that was on criminal justice reform or gun violence prevention, being unafraid to take on some of the most difficult and polarizing issues. But we had the ambition to believe that it is possible to get real results. And I think Wisconsinites are hungry for that right now.
Okay, thank you all. This lasts until about 1 o'clock, so we're going to try to speed it up a little bit. That was the speech making portion of the program. So now I'm going to ask some questions, then we'll get some questions from the audience. I'm going to try to dispense with titles, and I'm going to try to stagger the who goes first kind of thing. And I will ask some follow-up questions too. Anyway, the news of the day here is that Joe Biden, your president, I guess, is he's in the state, he's in La Crosse, he's pumping his infrastructure plan, a bipartisan plan that has created some controversy in the Democratic Party. Let's go to Sarah Godlewski first. Sarah, would you vote for this bipartisan infrastructure bill if you were in the U.S. Senate?
Well, here's what I know about the infrastructure package is that Wisconsinites have been waiting for years for actually money from the federal government for clean water. We've been waiting for money to expand broadband. 28% of rural Wisconsinites simply don't have access. And we've been waiting for money to fix our roads as we're driving around roads that are rated a D+. And so we've got to get everything we have to do everything we can to get this through. But at the same time, I think the conversation needs to be about reconciliation and how we have to make sure we have affordable childcare, paid family leave. We have to make the child tax credit permanent. And yes, we have to make sure climate action is included in that reconciliation process.
So you'd vote for this one and you want another one, right?
I would say it's all part of that package, right? Wisconsinites have over and over again said, we cannot afford to be drinking from lead pipes anymore. Our rural communities and across the state have said they need access to broadband. I mean, the pandemic illustrated, Jeff, how challenging it was as businesses couldn't go online, telemedicine wasn't available. So it was a real imperative that we get broadband across this state, and our roads are costing people money out of their own pockets because they're impacting their cars. And so, yes, we have to.
Okay, so would you vote for the bipartisan one without the other one?
I think it goes that it's not an either or. I don't know about the deals specifically, but I know what's right for Wisconsin is roads, water, and infrastructure. Like that's.
Okay, good. All right, Chris Larson, would you vote for that bipartisan bill as a U.S. Senator?
Yeah, look, I think we need to make sure that we're addressing the fundamentals of climate change, and that, so I do believe that if that is not addressed, we are just kind of tinkering around the edges, and we can spend a bunch on infrastructure. But as we are seeing in the Northwest right now with record highs, and we're seeing in Florida, that if you are not addressing the underlying infrastructure and you're not addressing climate change, we're going to be spending a heck of a lot more trying to make up for it later on. So yeah, I think that we should be pushing for as much as we can in a narrow Senate, but absolutely trying to push for even more down the road. And yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot more to infrastructure than just pouring cement. I think it is about what actually gets people out to work. And anybody who's got kids, I've got two, after that, you start to do the math of whether it's affordable for you to both be working as parents. And so until we have affordable quality childcare that's guaranteed for every American, we're holding back an entire generation of folks. So I think that's something we need to be pushing.
Okay, so would you vote for this bipartisan bill without the other one?
I mean, look, I think we have to be pushing. It's yes and keep pushing the envelope. And I will take issue with what you said of our president. I'd say he's all of our president unless you're Ron Johnson and believe in conspiracy theories and pushing that. So
well, I'm not indicating that I don't believe he's the president. I just meant, he's he's your president, so
all of
setting up this question. All right, Alex Lasry, would you vote for that bill, the bipartisan bill in the U.S. Senate?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is $1 trillion of infrastructure that's going to come into our communities. That's going to help bring broadband across the entire state. That's going to bring jobs and investment and hopefully good union jobs. So I think, yeah, this deal, as President Biden has said, is a BFD. Like, this is an important thing for us to make sure that we're getting passed. And it's a lot of money. It's one of the biggest investments in infrastructure in our nation's history. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't also be pushing for the reconciliation package and to make sure that we're able to pass the American Families Plan. Those two things aren't separate. They're not things that I think we need to be thinking about differently. But yeah, this bill is really important. It's going to be a big deal. And I think one of the reasons that I'm running and that we're all, I think, trying to make sure that we get rid of Ron Johnson is Ron Johnson's not someone who's fighting to bring those federal resources back to Wisconsin. And that's a really big problem because a lot of your job as a U.S. Senator is to bring federal resources back to your home state. And we've got $1 trillion of infrastructure projects that could be funded. We need to make sure that we have two senators who are actually fighting to make sure that those federal dollars are coming back here to Wisconsin and that we're creating those type of good union jobs here in this state.
Okay, now let's go to Tom Nelson. Tom, would you vote for this bipartisan bill? And do you need to have the other one to vote for this one?
I think we need to focus on and push for reconciliation. My position is very similar to that of Senator Sanders. And so not just reconciliation, but I think that this is the opportunity since we are in the majority, and it's been a long time. I think we learned a lot of lessons from 2009, that there's an extent to which Republicans are going to work with Democrats. It is absolutely crucial that we tie the infrastructure bill to the Green New Deal, that we use this opportunity to address not just the country's infrastructure needs, but also the climate crisis. So that means investing in retrofitting buildings, whether it's multimodal, or roads, replacing lead piping, and saying nothing about not just residual benefit, but a main benefit, which is creating hundreds of thousands of jobs. Here in Outagamie County in Northeast Wisconsin, we are rich in the building trades. And we got a lot of good paying jobs here. I mean, you're talking about even more good paying jobs, and that's something that has not been lost me, nor supporters around the state, which is why I'm proud to have the endorsement of Local 599 for the Operating Plasters and Cement Masons Union.
Okay, so just to clarify, you both of them have to pass, not just the one.
Mhm.
Okay,
Well, right now the focus has to be on reconciliation. Like I said before, this is a really important opportunity, and I don't think that we're there yet. Focus has to be on reconciliation.
so focus on the second Democrat-dominated bill, right?
If you're talking about, my focus is just achieving the ends is to try to get as many components of environmental and climate change objectives as possible into the final bill, or whichever piece of legislation that is.
Okay, Stephen O'Cara, would you vote for this bipartisan bill without the other one?
Yeah, this isn't hard. So when I went up to Kewaunee County, one of the biggest issues I heard was the importance of getting broadband access, not only for businesses to get off the ground, but also to attract and retain young people. And I hear that in a lot of rural counties I go to. So absolutely, I would support this bill because it's the difference between Wisconsinites getting the infrastructure they need and them not getting it. And so that's something that's super important. But that doesn't come at the expense of issues like funding childcare and elder care and climate change mitigation. One of my personal callings in life is taking on climate change. So we're going to fight for that. And we need to pass this infrastructure bill. And it's part of my larger systemic critique of politics. The reason why bills like this are ballooned so out of shape is because of how gridlocked and divided our politics are. So there's a feeling like we have to get everything in this one bill because it's our only shot. So part of what I'm offering here is to create a more rational, functional governing process so we can take on issues one topic at a time and have a real deliberative process that delivers results for Wisconsinites. Right now, most Wisconsinites are not being served by this political system. We need to change it.
So you're against the reconciliation process?
No, I fully support the reconciliation process as well, and I support the bipartisan infrastructure bill.
But you prefer the bipartisan infrastructure bill because it's bipartisan?
No, I support both because one, we need the infrastructure bill. So Wisconsinites, right now, 82,000 children in Wisconsin do not have reliable broadband access. They need that right away. And we need to pursue the reconciliation process for the other pieces that were left out of the bipartisan bill.
But your hope and wish is for a more bipartisan U.S. Senate, I think, is what I heard.
Well, I definitely want a deliberative U.S. Senate. That's the reason why it exists. And that's been my life for the past 10 years. Is having a governing process that is inclusive, where people are listening, reaching out, and building coalitions. Frankly, that's the job of a U.S. Senator. That's what Wisconsinites are so hungry for. They say, why do we have this food fight? We're not getting results. That's the shift that we need to make in our politics.
Okay, Joe Bettino from Wausau. What's your view on this bipartisan infrastructure bill that Biden is in the state pushing today?
So I would absolutely support the bipartisan infrastructure bill. I believe that it's definitely a step in the right direction. It brings, I think we have $2.2 trillion of infrastructure investments, which is going to come with jobs, economic stability for a lot of people. And it certainly begins to address the climate change catastrophe that we're facing by providing EV access across the country and looking at our sustainable electric transit and electric school buses and already addressing things that affect racially challenged, our racial populations who are facing lead pipes, and their kids are getting lead poisoning, and lead pipes are to be replaced as part of that bill. So I absolutely support it. Legacy pollution, all of these sorts of things are addressed in that bill. It's not enough. It's a first step. And so reconciliation is the next step, but I don't think that we need to get stuck in the mud. That's on the list. We need to get started and start making progress. These are the types of things that I believe have held us back in the past.
All right, let's move on to another bill that was didn't advance in the U.S. Senate, and maybe there's a chance for another kind of elections reform bill. But it also goes to criticism that maybe the White House didn't push hard enough, like it's pushing now for infrastructure. Do you think the White House pushed hard enough? Let's go to Chris Larson first. Do you think the White House pushed hard enough on the elections reform measure that was before the U.S. Senate?
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's a 50-50 Senate, and it's led, the Republican side is led by somebody who's gone on the record saying he's 100% focused on stopping Biden's administration, and has looked the other way and voted against, with his entire party, I'd add, with Ron Johnson, voted against even investigating the causes and preventing future insurrections at the US Capitol. And so when we are talking about trying to be able to find bipartisanship, if you don't have bipartisan partners who are living within the same reality, it becomes a heck of a lot tougher. And that, of course, is in the light of what they're doing in Georgia and what they're doing and trying to do in Texas and doing in other states, where they're fundamentally trying to destroy democracy and having the ability to overturn it. So yes, the president can push, and he should push for whatever he can get, whether it is Manchin's proposal to be able to stop partisan gerrymandering and allow for some early voting across the states. We've got to do it and then build on that next time. And frankly, democracy is at stake, and there's only one party that's actually fighting for democracy right now, which is says a lot about our political system.
Okay, I'm going to ask Chris, I'm going to ask you another question that kind of goes with that, is the whole filibuster thing. Do you think, and I'll ask each of you this too, because the two issues are tied. So, if you're there, would you get rid of the filibuster?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think most of the people on this agree, and we could probably do like a thumbs up or thumbs down, but like, yeah, I think we should be getting rid of the filibuster. Working in institutions where most of the time it's majority rule, you've got to be able to finally get something done. And especially in this case where they're blocking the ability to make sure that our neighbors' voices are heard across the country. It's fundamental to make sure that that happens, those bills pass, and we preserve democracy for the next generation. So yeah.
Okay, thanks. Well, Alex Lasry, what about the election reform and the filibuster? Because if the filibuster hadn't been in place, wouldn't the election reform bill have passed?
Yeah, and look, I think the president, did a lot of what he could to make sure that, this became a top issue. That's why it was presented so early. But, the president can magically make 10 Republicans want to join on board to help create some election reform. And so this is why I think, I think pretty much everyone here agrees that we should get rid of the filibuster. I mean, the filibuster is a classic Washington example of allowing politicians to not be held accountable and to be able to run on issues that they know might not get passed, and it also helps Republicans even more because it shows that, it feeds into this narrative that government's not working and that things aren't getting done. And so what I think is, if you get rid of the filibuster and voters have voted you in to pass an agenda, the Democrats got the presidency, the Senate, and the House. So voters clearly liked the agenda that we were talking about. We should have that opportunity to pass it and then be held accountable in that next election. And so I think that what we need to do is, voting rights are extremely important. We need to pass the For the People Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. I think getting rid of filibuster is a big step forward in making sure that we're actually able to get things done. But one thing that we can't overlook in terms of voting rights and election reform is ensuring that we reelect Tony Evers as our governor. I mean, if we don't want to go the way of Georgia and Texas, the only thing stopping us from becoming Georgia and Texas in terms of voting rights is Tony Evers. And so making sure that we actually reelect Governor Evers is probably one of the biggest things we can do here in Wisconsin to protect voting rights.
All right, Tom Nelson, the election reform measure, did President Biden work hard enough to push that in the Senate? And your view on the filibuster?
Yeah, I think he worked really hard on that. I think it's too bad it didn't pass. And look, I mean, we have to get rid of the filibuster, especially designed for Wisconsin, because we're the ones who have suffered greatly from the gerrymandering, more so than any other state. And that's an issue, that's a topic that bill would support. Another thing too that's important about this, my wife was a co-plaintiff on a lawsuit last year because she was not able to vote in the April election of 2020 because she was immunocompromised because she had cancer and she didn't get her absentee ballot. Her absentee ballot was mailed late. And so she was part of this lawsuit that was one of the last ones decided by the Supreme or by the federal judiciary. And that's one more example about how that how that lawsuit would have enabled better access to absentee ballots. And we see that there's another lawsuit attacking that again. So, it's at the point now where I think a lot of people are like, we just, let's just get done with this monkey business, and let's just focus on trying to take care of this issue that was once upon a time taken care at the national level with the Civil Rights Act. And also think about how much more earlier in this country we would have had civil rights reform if we did not have a filibuster.
Okay, Stephen Lucara, election reform and the filibuster.
This is the top issue in my view, and I have a unique perspective on the elections bill because I was involved in developing it before it was first introduced on the House side. And my view is the biggest issue right now is, do people trust our political process? And right now, there's a lot of good reason why people don't trust it, because we have big money that's completely taking over our politics. It's corrupting our elected officials. It's causing members of Congress to, at times, spend a majority of their time raising money as telemarketers as opposed to doing their job as legislators. And on top of that, there's a filter in terms of who's even allowed to run for office in the first place. And so, when I grew up in Brookfield, a lot of my friends didn't grow up knowing a lot of millionaires and billionaires who can fund their campaign. That's just not a normal experience for a lot of people. So we need a new politics that allows the working class and non-traditional candidates to run for office. And that's what this elections bill is speaking to. And I'm proud through my organization that we've been involved in actually passing the key components of that at both the state and congressional levels in different ways. Getting rid of partisan gerrymandering, campaign finance reforms, expanding voting rights, and ensuring automatic voter registration. These are all reforms where I've built bipartisan consensus on and got those reforms over the finish line. So I'll fully support this and be its biggest champion in the U.S. Senate.
Okay, Jill Bettino.
Okay. I think that President Biden did what he could to get our voting rights back on track. I think that we need to do more work with more bipartisan work and more collaboration. As Steve has alluded to on multiple times here, that we need to work together a little bit more. And there seems to be this divisive rhetoric that even is showing up within our Democratic Party that I believe is really, we need to be accountable to that. And when I go across Wisconsin and talk to folks, they're tired of it. They want people to work together. We don't need to, to be as divisive. We need to move forward. And the reason things are 50-50 and we can't move forward is because of that division. So I would like to, not President Biden, but I would like to ask members of Congress, and for myself, I would definitely be dedicated to finding a path forward that includes collaboration on the other side of the aisle. In terms of, the filibuster, it has to go, but we need to be realistic about what that means for our Democratic Party. That means that we do have to increase our strength in the Senate and in the House of Representatives, because otherwise we give up the filibuster and we're going to be missing it very quickly after that. So, absolutely, there are urgent, emergent issues right now: healthcare, racial justice, voting rights that require us to get rid of the filibuster at this moment in time, and also require us to grow and empower our Democratic Party to maintain strength.
Okay, Sarah Godlewski, what about election reform? Did President Biden push that enough? And what about the filibuster? Do you also agree with everybody here? I think that the filibuster should go.
Well, election reform and democracy is actually one of the reasons why I'm even in this race, is because I saw firsthand in my 2018 election how broken the system is. Our state elected all 5 constitutional officers to serve, but yet we didn't take anywhere near a majority in the state legislature. Why? Because of gerrymandering. We've got to do everything to make sure every single Wisconsinite has a voice. And part of that is making sure we get through the We the People Act. What that act is going to do is it's going to get money out of politics. One of the reasons why we're not able to get climate change through is because the fossil fuel industry just pays these politicians for it. Why we can't lower prescription drugs because pharmaceutical companies are paying off these politicians. And We the People Act is going to get money out of politics. You know, in addition to that, we are seeing hundreds of bills across this country that are being attacked on our voter rights. And this would actually make sure that it will make it easier to vote, not harder. And you know, Jeff, with regard to the filibuster, I thought a lot about this because actually my background in undergraduate work was in peace and conflict resolution. And what I have seen is that the filibuster actually does more to drive conflict than actually collaboration. And Wisconsinites, when I travel across the state, they're like, Washington is broken. It can't get anything done. And so when they elect a US senator, they want them to get the job done. And part of what we have to do that is to get rid of the filibuster. I mean, it is clear Wisconsinites want the federal government to step up when it comes to providing resources to get rid of lead pipes, to expand broadband, to fight for our environment. And Ron Johnson single-handedly is holding up these votes. I mean, most recently, he held up a vote that would make us more competitive against China. And so enough is enough. And we've got to get rid of the filibuster so we can deliver for the people of Wisconsin. And that's actually something that I would be committed to doing as a US Senator.
Okay, so let's go to some questions from the audience now, and then I'll come back at the end with some pure political questions. But let's talk a little bit here about, and Alex Lasry, I think you're first on this one. You know, there's a lot of questions we have here about healthcare, about how to tackle poor people's healthcare, or people at the margins, or maybe older folks who are retired. And I guess I'm going to line it up as choices. Which would you push for? Would you push for expansion of Medicaid, expanding the ACA more, lowering the Medicare age, or Medicare for all? Or do you have your own plan?
I think where we're all starting from is, and I think we all agree on this, is that healthcare is a human right. Healthcare is something that everyone is entitled to, and you shouldn't be worried about if you lose your job or if you get sick, that you're going to go bankrupt and not be able to pay for your health needs. I think that's something we can all agree on, and I think that's what we all want, is to make sure that healthcare is a human right for everybody. You know, I personally think, and I'm with, where President Biden is that, the quickest and most effective way to make sure that everyone is covered is to make sure that we're creating a public option in addition to the ACA. And so, that's where I am. I want to make sure that everyone is covered and that everyone is able to have healthcare. And I think that adding a public option is one of is probably, the quickest and most effective way to ensure that everyone is covered.
Okay, Tom Nelson, what's your cure-all for the healthcare system?
Medicare for all. I mean, I think we're at the point right now where I'm just tired of, nibbling around the edges of this monster that gets bigger and bigger. And this is personal for me too. My wife had cancer and she's recovering now, though my mom had cancer as well and she passed away. And what they both have in common is they had access to good health insurance, and 30 million Americans cannot say the same thing, and millions of Americans are without adequate health insurance. We're the only industrialized country in the world that doesn't have this. This is something that affects everyone. It goes to the core of who we are. It's attached to economy, it's attached to racial justice. I mean, healthcare should be a human right, and that's something that that Washington, the politicians have really failed to recognize. And I think if we make this a priority, and this will be a priority for me, I think that this could be one of the most important pieces of legislation that the Congress adopted in a long time.
All right, Stephen Olakara.
So I think we need to reframe the healthcare issue. Not only is healthcare a human right, but when I talk to entrepreneurs across the state or people who want to start businesses, we're also talking about how healthcare can be a driver of new business growth in our state. And I know this from personal experience. When I was starting my organization, there's a risk and a fear of jumping into something new where you don't have healthcare guaranteed right away. I talk to a lot of people who want to pursue their passions, try something new, but they're a slave to their corporation because they want to keep their benefits and a stable income. So I strongly believe we need a healthcare guarantee for people. And it's not only morally the right thing to do, it's also economically the right thing to do. But we also need to be more sophisticated about this issue in terms of why is it that healthcare inflation has gone so off the rails over the past 30 years? And part of it is because doctors and our healthcare system in general are incentivized to keep giving us more and more and more. It's a healthcare system based on volume as opposed to based on our health. And we know if we were investing in preventive health, the overall cost and the premiums for everyone would be going down. The final thing we have to absolutely do, this is a no-brainer, is to reduce the cost of prescription drugs and allow Medicare to be able to negotiate with the prescription drug companies. The only reason why that's not happening is because of how corrupted our politics are, how much the lobbyists have taken over the healthcare debate. We need to reverse it so that people, ordinary people, are at the center of the healthcare conversation.
Okay, Joe Bettino.
Okay, so as a physician, I feel very strongly, and I would expect you to be worried if I didn't feel very strongly that every human being deserves awesome healthcare. And by that, I mean comprehensive healthcare, emergency care, preventative healthcare, addiction care, mental health care, end-of-life care, pharmaceutical coverage care, dental, vision, hearing care. It should all be covered for everyone. The public option is not a great option to me. When we start drawing those kinds of lines, then somebody gets left out. Right now, 5 to 9% of kids in this country don't have healthcare insurance. It's completely unacceptable. I don't know if you've heard my story, but my dad got strep throat when he was a kid and died when he was 29 years old, and I was 2, because of rheumatic heart disease. He could have been treated, right, with antibiotics, simple. That will continue to happen. This is still a disease of poverty. Everyone deserves healthcare. We can save $6 trillion over a decade by going to single payer Medicare for all. It is a no-brainer. We know that we can reduce our cost and cover everyone. We know this. So I think the only reason we don't do it is because lobbyists and dark money are pushing against it. So Medicare for all, absolutely single payer.
Sarah Godlewski.
Well, I think all of us on this stage agree that healthcare is a human right. And look, I remember a time in my life when my car had better insurance than I did. And I don't want to go back to those days. We fought very hard to make sure Obamacare is the rule of this land. I mean, right now, you can't discriminate against women or pre-existing conditions because of Obamacare. And millions of Wisconsinites would be affected. So no, I don't want to scrap it and start all over. Our people who have good health care, we would have to throw it out and have them start all over. But we've got to have big, bold ideas to make our health care even better. I mean, lowering prescription drugs is one of the places we've absolutely have to start. I mean, I was talking with a Wisconsinite not too long ago who told me he was skipping pills because he simply could afford it. So our government money is being used to develop these prescription drugs, but yet we're not able to negotiate. Or right here in Wisconsin, we saw how the Republican legislature refused to expand Medicaid, which would have provided insurance for over 90,000 more Wisconsinites and provided the state an additional $1 billion. So we have to expand Medicaid, we have to expand Medicare, and yes, we need universal coverage through a public option. But it's all of these ideas that I think together are going to make our state and our country healthier, because at the end of the day, if we don't have our health, we have nothing.
Okay, Chris Larson.
Yeah, count me in for Medicare for all, and I've been in for that for a while. As somebody who grew up with asthma since I was 5 years old, found the hard way that I was uninsurable, and that they would be willing to cover just about everything except for my asthma medication. So having walked the walk of having lived a life where I had to split pills and had to cut my doses to just try and survive, I know what it's like, and it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous in a country where we're spending more on healthcare than every other country, but it's still the #1 cause of individual bankruptcy. So yes, we need to have Medicare for all. It is a right. It's not a product. Healthcare is not a product. And so we need to be doing what we can to make sure that everybody is fundamentally covered. And I think right now we don't have that. We made as many gains as we could years ago, but there's so much more that we can do. You know, it shouldn't be a question that when you have a symptom that you have to wonder if your healthcare is actually going to cover you or not, or you're going to go broke trying to stay alive, or that when you're a loved one or a child comes down with something, that you're skipping going to the doctor because you have a ridiculous copay to be able to have coverage. That is ridiculous. It is preventable, and we can absolutely do that. And I would add, as much as there might be some differences between us here on the Democratic side of what we want to do, it's worth remembering that on the other side, we had Ron Johnson, who put all of his energy in trying to destroy the gains that we made in the ACA, including filing an individual lawsuit on his own. So that's what we're up against, is those who want to take us backwards. So I want to move us forward as much as we can in making sure this is a right, and nobody goes broke and nobody goes sick, and we actually have a healthcare system when you need it.
All right, on to the next audience question. How would you handle the current border situation? We're talking about the situation at the southern border and thousands of migrants from Central America crossing the border. So we're going to Tom Nelson now on this one. You're first, Tom.
Sure. I think that this is emblematic of a terribly failed foreign policy, something that has been completely neglected in the last 4 years with Donald Trump, who has made this worse. And also someone like Ron Johnson, who has done little to nothing to actually fix this, but of course has the temerity to criticize this administration again and again, when all he has to do is look in the mirror. And that's one of the reasons why we've not made any progress on this issue. When I say foreign policy, this country needs to focus like a laser on our policies in Central America, because that is the source of the problem. Folks are coming up here because they're facing persecution, because their lives are threatened, and even more. Now, if we address that problem, I think it's going to go a long way getting to the root, to the root cause of this problem. I think it's going to go a long way in addressing this problem.
Okay, Stephen Olakara, what about the situation at the southern border? What should be happening there?
Jeff, if there's one contribution I can make in politics, it's creating a more humanitarian and empathetic kind of politics. And what we have on the southern border right now is not an immigration crisis. It is mothers and children who are fleeing persecution and lawfully seeking a refugee status in our country. That's something that we should be providing. We have a moral obligation to do that. And it's a stain on our character as a nation that we're not seeing the humanity of the children down there. So we need to change that policy and make sure we're much more welcoming to people who've lost everything at the southern border.
Joe Bettino, how would you solve the southern border situation?
So I think that this has been, a problem for my entire adult life. I remember hearing about the politicians focusing on this when I was in high school. It's so long overdue to be addressed. So I think that we need to do a lot of things. We need to support, provide aid for countries in Central and South America who are struggling with their issues of corruption and violence, to create a space where they can stay in their own country. People don't want to leave their countries. I've worked extensively in Nicaragua and Guyana, and people do not want to leave their families behind. They leave out of desperation. When they do get to our borders, the world is watching. We need to demonstrate our humanity and our, the importance of democracy and what we consider to be the most important democratic principles, and that is, human right and the importance of human life. So we need to create ways for people to become citizens. We need to make sure that they had educational opportunities to contribute to this country. And I see, certainly all of the issues of protecting our DACA recipients and integrating folks into our society to help rebuild our infrastructure. I think these are all opportunities that we can take advantage of while we are aggressively prioritizing the humanitarian crisis at the southern border.
Sarah Godlewski.
Well, we are a country of immigrants, and I believe our diversity is part of our greatest strength. But look, Donald Trump and Ron Johnson is part of the reason why this chaos at the border even exists. They wasted billions of tax dollars to build a border wall that did nothing. You know, part of the solutions that we need to talk about is modernizing the border and having more humane solutions. So, for example, it's not just about building a wall, it's about making sure that we have modernization with our airways and with our waterways. We know human traffickers are getting through our borders because we simply don't have the technology, and it's becoming a national security risk. You know, the other thing is we need a clear path to citizenship. You know, I'm talking to people in our communities that are serving as nurses or, you know, in essential services, and yet they can't become a citizen because the path is not clear, and it costs millions, thousands of dollars for them to do that. You know, dreamers who the only country they know is the United States, but they're not allowed to stay here. And then the final thing that is, we need to make sure the federal government provides flexibility to the state of Wisconsin and how we think about immigration. And what I'm talking about with that is our farmers. I'm talking to our farmers, and they're trying to find people to work at their farms because they've got to milk their cows 3 times a day, 7 days a week, 24 hours, like around the clock. And we know if we were able to open up immigration so they could work on these farms, it'd really help agriculture and our dairy farmers across our state. And so we've got to be pragmatic when we think about the border. And right now, Ron Johnson is simply causing chaos and making it more humane. He's not actually helping people in Wisconsin.
Jose, Chris Larson.
Yeah, thanks. I think that it's worth, again, echoing that it is Donald Trump that created this chaos on purpose, right? It was specifically his policy initiative that said we should be cruel, and the cruelty was the purpose of separating families, separating children from parents. And I think we should call him out for how disingenuous Ron Johnson is for now complaining that Joe Biden hasn't cleaned up after the mess fast enough. That he hasn't reunited families fast enough, and he hasn't solved the core problems that have plagued the region for years and decades, right? While he's done nothing for it. But I also think, so I think it's worth, right? It's worth echoing FDR's quote, "A nation doesn't have to be cruel to be tough." On that, I do think we need to recognize we are a nation of immigrants. We do need to make sure that we are recognizing that these are aspiring Americans that are coming our way, and making sure that we're also addressing through diplomacy the underlying problems in Central America where they are coming from. So I think it's about upping our expenditures on diplomacy through the State Department and taking those funds from the bloated Pentagon budget, which is ridiculously overextended. Those are things that actually do keep us safe. But I will add, Jeff, obviously you're echoing, you're putting forward a question from somebody else. It's worth noting that the real reason this question is before us is because of the scapegoating that exists out there, that fear, that trying to trump up that fear ever since Donald Trump was talking about who's coming over our borders and disparaging other people, right? And the reality is of who's actually rigging this system are the super rich, are corporations, and they love to use this scapegoating to try and scare people into voting one way, while at the same time robbing us blind by rigging the system so that the 25 richest Americans are not paying their fair share. The 100 largest corporations are paying nothing, close to nothing in their fair share of what should actually be happening. So while we're actually sitting here talking about this, I think it's worth talking about the fundamental problems that have led to disparities in wealth in our country that lead to people worried about their future. The worry should be focused on the people who are causing it, not by the people that the rich people are pointing at and saying, fear them.
Okay, Alex Lazary.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is an issue that's, pretty personal to me. I mean, my dad is an immigrant. He came here from, left the Jewish quarter of Morocco and came here because I think like millions of families right now are trying to, because they're looking for a better life and better opportunity in the greatest country in the world. And, a story like my dad's can only happen, here in America. And so I think when we think about, what's going on, I think what we need to do is one, make sure that the economies in Central America are, ones that are stable and that those are stable countries, so that people aren't looking to flee and leave their homes, so that people want to stay, and that will be a rising tide that will lift all boats. If we're able to help the economies of Central America, that's going to be able to help the economy of the United States. And I think then what we also need to make sure that we're doing is not allowing kind of Republicans to create this false choice between, do you, let everyone in, or, are you going to put people in cages? I mean, I think this is something where we can say, hey, look, we need to have a lawful immigration process, and that if people are coming in illegally, we're still not treating them like animals and separating families and putting them in cages, but being able to treat people like they are, like human beings. And so I think that's something that the president is trying to do right now, and is how we need to make sure that we're doing this going forward. And then I think we need to be able to create a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, and ensure that we're actually creating an efficient and effective and clear pathway to citizenship for anyone who's trying to come into this country. I think we need to be able to reform the immigration system so that it's of the 21st century, and that we're making sure that people are able and understand the clear and legal path to get into this country.
All right, let me squeeze in two more questions here. The first one now to Stephen Olakara. The question from the audience is, would you eliminate student debt? Vote to eliminate student debt.
Well, first of all, let's talk about why we need to take on student debt. And the reason is because we have more student debt in this country than we have credit card debt. And it's causing a drag on the entire economy. And it's not just impacting young people and members of my generation, it's impacting everyone. When young people today are delaying purchasing a house or a car, or even getting married and having children, that has a downward impact on our entire economy. So we have to take this issue on. I'm proud to have been part of a number of student loan reforms over the years. And one of the big things we can do is ensure that we're addressing the root issue here. A lot of young people are going to colleges and racking up hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt with no hope of ever paying that off. So there needs to be a lot more transparency on the front side. We need a much bigger investment in our public universities, so the cost of tuition is going down. And we need to provide some humane and economically feasible approaches for people to pay off their student debt. One of my favorite approaches.
Okay, so should it be eliminated?
Of course, we have to eliminate it. The question, Jeff, is how do we eliminate it?
Well, should the government fund, eliminate it with a bill in Congress and fund elimination of the student debt?
Just a blanket check to every dollar of student debt is unwise right now. That's not addressing the root problem, because then we're going to have another student debt bubble maybe 10 years from now. So, my approach in politics is to look at the systemic reasons why a problem exists in the first place. And I'm proud to have been part of passing a number of student debt reforms over the years with Democrats and Republicans coming together.
Okay, Jill Bettino, let's try to speed up here a little bit so we can get in under our minute. But anyway, should we, do you favor eliminating existing student debt for those who owe it now?
Yes, I do. I think it's an economic stimulus for young people to begin living their lives and investing in our economy and in their futures. I think it liberates young people to start small businesses, which are the backbone of our resilient economy. And I think it also goes a long way towards supporting, the racial inequity in education. So I think it should be forgiven. And then I think that we need to come up with free public education going forward.
Okay, Sarah Godlewski.
I mean, this issue is pretty personal for me. When I left school, I had $75,000 of debt and was paying up to 9% interest on my loans. And so we've got to think of, it's not just a one size fits all approach. Yes, part of it is debt, but it's also about college affordability. We know colleges continue to become more expensive. And on the same side, it's how are you financing your college degree, where literally, lenders can charge 9-10% interest, but yet for a car in a house, they can only charge 3-4%. And so we've got to think about systemically how we are addressing this, because yes, this generation has been burdened by student debt. It's why we have a below average home ownership rate, because people can't afford to buy homes or buy cars, because they're literally paying a lot of, it's $20 billion of student debt in this state.
Right, should we just forgive it then?
So it goes back to, yes, that's part of the solution, but there's a lot of other things that we've got to look at to make sure college is affordable.
Okay, Chris Larson.
I love that you want us all to answer this complex question in 1 minute, and I appreciate the duty that you're under here.
Well,
Jeff.
we're gonna have more of these, Chris. So
I know, but just like a deep, complex question on this one. I would say, look, as somebody who tried his best to pay his way through college to the point where I was working full time, going to school full time, and sleeping about 4 hours a night, it's impossible to be able to do the same way it was 30 years ago. So we need a fundamental change. And I believe that college should be debt free, and that goes for everybody. So my view of education is it should be public for everybody from kindergarten all the way till 99. If we're investing in the future, if we're investing in education, that's an investment that the community should pay for, and it shouldn't be put on the burden of folks who are going into debt and frankly sacrificing their futures in a way where they're not able to do what they would like to do and realize their full potential. Right.
So forgive what's existing and make it free going forward.
I think that there's a number that I'm open to negotiating on. But yeah, I think there has to be something that wipes out the college debt so that people can actually start from scratch. But you have to address the underlying fundamentals of why the thing costs so much.
Okay, Alex Lasry.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think, everyone's kind of been talking about how, like, look, this isn't just about forgiving student debt right now, but making sure that we don't create this bubble again going forward. And so, I think one of the great proposals that I think it was President Obama that he proposed was, if you go to school and you decide to go work in AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, government, public service, well, then and you do that for 5, 6, 7 years. Well, then the government will pay off your student debt. If you decide to go work at Google, you can then afford to start to work to pay that back. And so I think that is a really good idea. But we also need to make sure that things don't happen where you are paying 9% student loan interest rate, so that you aren't racking up these insurmountable amount of debts. This is something where there should be a flat, if you're doing a flat fee to make sure that you can go to school if it's too expensive. And then also making sure that, community colleges are free as well. We also need to make sure that this idea that you have to go to a 4-year university doesn't become the stigma. If you want to go to community college or trade school, we need to make sure that we're investing in that as well, because that's how we're going to open up our labor pool and ensure that people are able to get educated and are able to get the education that they want.
Okay, and Tom Nelson on this one.
Right, Jeff, I'm going to help you out with this with a one-word answer, and that is yes.
Oh man, Tom, thank you. All right,
You owe me one.
then I'm going to work backwards now from Tom, since he gave up some of his time. So anyway, let's just talk. Let's close this out now. You all agree on a lot of things. This one, there were some differences, but what really sets you apart from the rest of these folks, Tom? And everybody gets to answer this question before we exit.
Okay. I mean, this race really comes down to one question. This is what I heard on the campaign trail, which is who can beat Ron Johnson? Same question we heard 2 years ago with Donald Trump. I'm the one who's best positioned to beat Ron Johnson because I come from a tough part of the state that Democrats have had a really tough time figuring out. I've won 6 times, 3 as a legislator and 3 as a county executive, which also gives me the unique experience and background being both a legislator and executive. If you want government to work, you need to know how it runs. I've been doing that for 17 years. I also have a record of accomplishment being a legislator and as an executive. In the legislature, I fought hard against the payday lending industry, despite the fact that there at one time were 30 lobbyists registered to defend them. I fought to save senior care, and when it was unpopular, I voted against the marriage ban back in 2006. As county executive, I helped grow an international airport that's now worth $700 million of economic activity every single year, the most important piece of economic real estate in Northeast Wisconsin. I've passed budgets that have received in some cases almost unanimous vote from the county board. And trust me, in Outagamie County, they're not all Democrats. We've been able to pioneer a criminal justice treatment services program that some folks are just catching on to. We have been doing it for 10 years. And my story is that of thousands of Wisconsinites, hundreds of thousands of Wisconsinites. I grew up in a blue collar neighborhood in Little Chute, Wisconsin. As mentioned, all the dads there worked in the mill. My dad was a Lutheran pastor, and I learned these important lessons. That's lessons that I think resonate all across the state.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. All right, Chris Larson, what really separates you from these other candidates?
Yeah, if you're looking for the proven progressive in the race, I'm it. I've gotten the only national endorsement of any progressive group. We've just got another one that was announced last night. And so you don't have to guess. I think that there's a deep bench of issues that are going to be coming up over the years. And I've been pretty clear and transparent about where I stand on those issues, putting out over 100 newsletters, or actually 200 newsletters, doing over 100 town halls to make sure I'm not just taking these stances, but making sure my neighbors understand it. That's something that I'll expand across the state to make sure that the public is there with me, that they are being heard and being fought for. I'm somebody that does whatever it takes. That includes that means taking a stand against Walker's attack on public employees, against teachers, and staying in Illinois for 3 weeks to raise up their voices. I've done that. If that is making sure that we are picking fights with the super rich, I've done that. So we've been in these battles. I'll continue to do that to make sure the system is unrigged so it works for everybody on issue after issue.
All right, Alex Lasry, I shuffled the deck too fast. Alex Lasry, what really separates you from the rest of these candidates?
And look, I think, what we're running a campaign on is how are we going to bring some real change and real results for the people of Wisconsin? And in that, how are we going to make sure that we're bringing jobs and investment to this state and raising wages? And so, when people are talking about things like a $15 minimum wage, we've done it. We pay that in Pfizer form. And when people talk about creating, hey, we need good jobs here in the state, well, we've created thousands of good union jobs that all pay a living wage. And that's why we're proud to have the endorsements of, the Teamsters, IBEW 494, our local IATSE, because, these are issues that are most important. How can we make sure that we're creating good union jobs here in Wisconsin? And I think what we need in that candidate is just something that's different, right? Like, I've worked in the highest levels of politics, but I'm not a politician. And I think when we're, looking for how can we bring some real results, having this kind of track record of having actually done it and bringing people together to bring those kinds of jobs and investment to the state, I think is important. And it's those exact same, progressive values that we've been able to show in our campaign and in our organization. If you want to see where people's values are, look at how they're running their campaign and their organization. We're the only campaign in the country to have a unionized campaign staff. And that's something we're really proud of. And so, that's what we're going to be running on and making sure that we're going across the state to ensure that people hear that message, and looking forward to getting out there and seeing everybody.
All right, Sarah Godlewski, what really separates you from the rest of these candidates?
I think we all can agree that Ron Johnson has to go, but it's not going to be easy. I mean, we saw that Joe Biden won by barely 20,000 votes. That's 4 or 5 votes per precinct. And I am the candidate in this race that has won and run a statewide election, not just once, but twice. The first campaign I ran at saving the state treasurer's office because I believe in checks and balances in government, and we took 63% of the vote. And then as state treasurer, I took more of the vote share than the governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. Yes, we won even Trump counties like Kenosha and Jackson. And that's what it's going to take. You've got to run a 72 county campaign to win this seat. And that's what I did in 2018. And that's what I'm going to do in this election, because I'm not just showing up for the first time. It's continuing to meet with folks and listening and learning and delivering results. And that's what I've been doing my entire career, whether it was my time at the Pentagon as a small business owner and now as state treasurer. I will continue to deliver the results for Wisconsinites by simply being scrappy. And I'm committed to beat Ron Johnson.
Okay, Joe Bettino.
Okay, so I think it's pretty obvious that I am probably the most unique candidate on this panel. I am still practicing. I still have a regular job. I know a lot of folks are not working or are just focusing on this or are in politics. I see patients 3 days a week. I help them address the most worrisome days of their life. I talk to them about their inadequate health care. I talk to them about transportation problems, all of the things that we're dealing with, from disabilities to poor health care to addiction. These are things that I am embedded in and immersed in every day. So these are personal battles for me, and I can promise you that they will stay personal when I'm in the Senate. Also, I have raised 6 children. I don't think anybody else can say that. I have raised 6 children. They are from age 15 to 25. My kids are diverse. I understand what it's like to advocate as a mama bear from the deepest, most protective part of my soul for every human being, my kids, my patients, my disabled brother who I'm the guardian for. I've lost a parent. I've nursed 2 parents through end-of-life crises. I think these kind of things make my team and myself and this campaign very relatable, boots on the ground, grassroots, the real deal. This campaign about me, this campaign extends across the country and across the state. We have 22 interns from all over the place who are working on the campaign.
Okay, good. All right, Stephen Olicaro, what really separates you from the rest of the candidates?
Well, thank you, Jeff, for having us. We need a movement to win this election. And my view is that it's the easiest thing in politics to say just what you're against. We all know that Ron Johnson is a lead actor in a broken system and represents the worst behaviors in our politics. I think the strongest candidate in 2022 will be the one who says what they're also for. What's the positive agenda that's going to bring our state together? One of the most exciting aspects of our state's politics is how politically diverse we are. We have people from all different kinds of backgrounds. We need a U.S. senator who's going to go out into all of our communities and listen and include and respect people, especially those who have been left out. So the winning coalition in 2022 is not only energizing Democrats, which we would do, but also expanding the electorate and respecting and including people who are particularly disaffected, independents and Republicans. They, as I said earlier, are feeling politically homeless right now. Democrats can be their home, but we can't be condescending. We can't be talking down. We need to be empowering and including. That's the style of politics I've practiced for the last 10 years. I've built the coalitions to pass legislation on every single issue we've talked about today. That's the kind of politics that will inspire people to come out in this election, which we have to do and we have to win. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks to all the candidates. It's hard with having 6 candidates. We went a little over time to make sure you all got your say. We'll try to do more of these. And next year, I'm sure there will be some formal debates. We're usually part of those. I really thank you for taking the time. And as I said, we'll do more for it. And folks, you can always go to wispolitics.com to see more on the U.S. Senate race from all sides. Now I want to thank our sponsors for this event. Couldn't do it without you. Hush Blackwell Strategies, Wisconsin Hospital Association, Walmart, ARP Wisconsin, American Family Insurance, and XL Energy. So until next time, this is Jeff Mayers from WisPolitics.